First, David, how are you in these crazy times?
Yeah, good. Just sitting in a rainy, wet, grey North London, trying to kind of stay motivated to make music and exercise and all the things that is hard to do when you're kind of in a lockdown. But yeah, could be better, could be worse.
With that in mind, then, the past 9 to 10 months, what was it like trying to be creative then? Was it because you had this whole album? I don't know how far you were with this album, this new album now, but what was it like kind of going through everything that everybody's going through, but then trying to create that album or complete that album?
Well, the majority of it was done. So okay. I sort of remember we were mixing it and the news started to come through about the Wuhan situation. And, the majority of the album was done. And then I think there was, when we went into the first lockdown, I remember I had a really creative sort of spurt where I was just like doing loads and loads, and then as the lockdown wore on and got boring, I sort of lost motivation, and then time sort of both went past really quick and really slow. It was weird. I don't know, because it seems to drag at the time seems to drag, but then the year just kind of went like that. And it's weird. Yeah, I mean, good in that it's more time in the studio, because usually as soon as you hand an album in, it's like, right, you're going on the road and you're going around the world a couple of times, literally. And it's amazing, doing that. But also being in the studio is amazing. So it's just got its ups and downs, and you have to kind of just go with the flow and ride the waves of creativity when they come, and then chill the rest of the time.
We'll get into it a little bit more, but there's some sense of escapism on the record. Now, in this period, what have you done to kind of escape from this reality that we're in? And was that being creative with the music, or did you have other avenues of kind of getting out of this mindset a little bit?
Yeah, the music's kind of escapism for us making it, because as I say, you can be in rainy North London and be listening to some African record that was made in the 60s or techno that was made in the 90s in Detroit. You can really travel the world through your record collection, and music's always been like that for me, escapism, in the same way that comic books and films were before that for me. It's like you can go anywhere, travel anywhere, and into outer space, to other planets, it's storytelling and it's kind of escapism. So that's how we treat making records as well, really.
Is that initially what attracted you to making music and being in a band?
I think so, yeah. I mean, growing up in Scotland, I was always obsessed with like hip hop and New York, and that really like drew me into wanting to be a drummer and make beats and be a DJ and stuff, and what was happening in hip hop and electro music, and then before that, listening to the Beatles and their sense of surrealism, and that went hand in hand with the surrealism of Monty Python, or surrealist cinema, or I was obsessed with the Magical Mystery Tour, the Beatles film.
Right.
For the comedy, the dream sequences that are a bit like Fellini. Maybe growing up in Scotland, that's, it's, you kind of dream of other places, of bigger cities or hotter beaches or whatever it is a little bit. So yeah, music was always a way of escaping a little bit.
And what I find interesting about that aspect of kind of being from a small town and wanting to see more of the world, once you kind of that became somewhat of a reality and you started touring, and you've toured in America and everywhere. What was that like? Did that change your mind about where you were from at all? Or was it, I don't know if this is the right formulation, but was it like you expected it to be, to kind of move away from home and to experience the world, so to say?
Yes and no, I guess, because especially when you tour America, it's not like you imagine it as a kid. It's not all fun and games,
Sure.
It's got a lot of social problems, and I noticed that more and more when we toured. And it's even worse now, is that, socialism there's non-existent. So there's a lot of disenfranchised people who've fallen through the gaps, and they don't tell you that in Hollywood movies when you're growing up. Or that, I mean, hip hop, I guess, came out of, obviously, the ghetto, and so you're aware that it's not all hunky-dory, but not to the full extent. It is, but that's like traveling anywhere. You get to see whether you're in India or America or anywhere, you see the light and the dark side of everywhere. And that's just part of traveling and seeing the world for what it really is, and rather than through a TV screen or the media when you're sat on your sofa. And yeah, I don't think I would have got to travel the world like that had I not been in the bands. I might have just picked and choose, I'll go to Italy where there's a really nice beach and a quaint town. You're not forced to play in the back room of a terrible pub in Philadelphia or San Francisco, sure, where someone's getting robbed outside. And so you're forced into just getting out there and seeing the world, which is great, but also made me miss Scotland and appreciate Scotland more.
Well, because that's what I especially, and this is kind of in a way where Waking Up kind of deals with that notion, that romantic notion of driving off into the sunset, and kind of. So, what was the first spark for that song? Was it a thought like this?
Yeah, it's just about escapism, and it's sort of influenced by the movie Wild at Heart, where it's like a road trip at night, and you're getting out of a town or a city at night, and when the sun rises and you're waking up in the new place, it's a better day, metaphorically.
Sure.
But it could be about escaping the city to a small town, or a small town to the big city. It's in everybody's own perspective, It's right. Just about getting out of somewhere because you've had enough of it,
When you first started, when the band first started gaining traction, and the first album was released around that time, and things started happening, what was the goal, so to say, for not only yourself but the band in general?
First of all, it was just to make an album, because I'd been making stuff on 4 tracks for about 10 years prior, from the mid-90s to the mid-noughties when we started the band, and just mucking around with sounds and samples, and as I say, making a lot of hip-hop beats or dancehall rhythms or acid house tracks, but none of them were ever songs or finished products. They were just experiments. And then so I felt like when I met Vinny, we sat down and had a drink in the pub, and it was like, well, we make an album now, starting next week. There won't be any demos or waiting for a record deal. We would have been happy just making an album and pressing it 100 copies ourselves.
Right.
It was just the fun of making an album was a huge deal and a huge mental block, to actually, you tell people you're making an album and they're like, yeah, right. Why? You don't have a record deal. You don't have a studio. You can barely play the instrument.
Sorry, but with that in mind, then were you surprised with how things turned out, especially after the release of that first record?
Massively, yeah. I mean, in the back of my head, I had the confidence that I could cobble together an album. Like, I had enough experience. Looking back on it, I didn't have a clue how to use any of the computer software, didn't have a clue how to mic up a guitar, anything. But it was just like, yeah, let's just do it. And it was fun. We were going to do it anyway without a record label. And then once you decide that, it's like the pressure's off.
Right.
Because, and I think because we'd gone to art school, we were really DIY focused. Like when you go to art school and you want to be an artist, you don't sit around waiting for money to make art. You have to just paint on the back of a cereal box if you don't have money for a canvas. Like no one's going to hand it to you on a plate. So
well, it's probably one of those things where when I went to journalism school, and I'm sure it's the same with art school, they kind of tell you in the beginning, if your thought was you're becoming rich off of this, then you're in the wrong place, kind of. That's at least what they told us. So I can imagine it's a similar thing. Well, you have to be there to have a passion for art, and not necessarily for financial gain in a way.
I mean, like, money was the last thing we thought of. And as you say, it's the same journalism or go to art school. It's like you go there because you want to do that thing regardless. There's never any thought of getting rich or even making a living. It's like it's expected that you're going to have a couple of jobs on the side.
Right.
And I mean, I was working in a pub and doing furniture removals throughout the whole first album, but I mean, looking back on it, there were good times. I think if a big advance is given to you from a major record label, and that can end a lot of bands because they just get lazy and they spend all the money and they don't have anything to write songs about. And
sure.
So I'm happy the way we did it. And then the label we signed to Because Music were the right label, because they were like, look, we don't want to get in the way, just make an album and give it to us and we'll put it out. So
that's great.
Yeah.
When it comes, because now you have a couple of albums under your belt, then did it make it a lot easier when kind of the preparations for this new album started up? Did it kind of feel like, okay, now we know what we're doing, we've been successful on our own terms with it in the past, so did it make the process easier, or does the process become easier?
Yes and no. It's like easier in the way that we'd had enough money to buy microphones and mic the drum kit up and pay the rent on the studio room and all that. But, it's sometimes you can lose focus or lose the drive, and everyone has to kick each other up the backside a little bit to not fall into the same patterns. or rely on the fact the last album did well. You know, so you have to keep on your toes and keep trying to evolve.
Sure.
All the ideas we've got enough ideas for about 4 lifetimes worth of albums. But it's like you have an idea in your head, and then sometimes it's like climbing up a bit of an uphill battle, getting it out of your head onto the page.
Sure.
So for loads of reasons, you know, but it kind of comes that for me, that motivation and that kind of drive comes in waves, and you have to just wait for the wave and ride it, and then it crashes, and you wait for the next wave a little bit. I think when you're in the studio every day, you can lose sight. You can't see the wood for the trees a little bit. So yeah, just learning that, and learning when to step back and when to really go for it in the studio.
Sure.
You know?
Do you remember the wave that kind of laid the foundation for Glowing in the Dark? Do you remember kind of that period where maybe the first couple of songs came out or kind of started fleshing out?
I think so, yeah. And I remember sort of us hitting a brick wall a few times and just having to really push through it. And we decided to start making a song a day, you know, rather than chipping away at one song for a month, just getting in the studio and in the morning and having something done by the end of the night. And that helped us push through. And once a few key songs have come to you, like maybe you've got 3 songs, you're like, these could be singles, then the pressure's off and you start mucking around a bit more, taking more risks, and building the album around those key songs. So yeah, it's just about pushing through and not getting lazy, really, like with the lyrics. Or, you know, quite often I'll come in and the band will have written a song, or Vinny's written a song, and he sings it to me, and I'm like, well, everything's great, but I have no idea what the song's about. And if I don't know, then you know, the fans won't know, or the public won't know. So being quite strict on that and just going, look, how can we really put across what we're trying to say properly? But yeah, I mean, you know, that's the good thing about being DIY, is that we're not waiting on a producer, or we're not waiting on anyone. We just go in there and do it every day. So we get to kind of do it at our own pace, really.
Sure. Well, can we pick one song then that kind of doesn't have to be kind of one of those key songs, but one that you were adamant on in terms of what you wanted to say with that song? And I mean, I can pick one, but I'll pose the question to you. Well, is there one that kind of sticks out for you in terms of what you wanted to say with that song?
Maybe like Kick the Devil Out.
Okay.
That song. It was one of those ones, and this happens from time to time, where I hear the demo and someone sung something that I thought they said something else. And I was like, I heard it and I said, did you just say we're going to kick the devil out? And they were like, no, you're going mad. And hearing voices. And it reminded me of, I don't know if you know this comedy group called Kids in the Hall.
No.
They're a Canadian comedy group who were a big favorite of mine in the 90s. And they had this really good sketch where this young teenage boy who's into heavy metal has a guitar duel with the devil in his mum and dad's garage. and beats the devil with his shredding skills, and it's just really, really funny. And we kind of cooked up this idea that wouldn't it be funny if you sort of invited the devil, Lucifer, to come and stay with you, and then instead of him just being really, really evil, he was actually just really annoying and like a bit slobbish and like didn't tidy up after himself. And you're like, it was a comedy kind of idea, comedy sketch.
That's interesting because I wrote down the first line of that song, and then it kind of it really stuck with me. Nothing is true and anything goes nowadays, which is very, very much kind of a very serious, I would say, assessment of what the world is at the moment. So,
oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, everything within these songs, they might be daft or funny, but there's usually little lines that are about, can be interpreted, you know, anyway. And that line's sort of about anything could happen, and also the media could say anything happened. The whole fake news phenomenon.
Sure.
So, you know, you turn on the news and this woman's living with the devil himself and can't get him out of her house. He's moved in and he won't leave. And it's like, you know, the world's so mad that that could happen now. Right. That's what that line's about, is like, nothing surprises us anymore.
Right. Well, that song, I found that one of the more interesting ones as well. There's another song I wanted to kind of slightly get into, and this goes into kind of the feel of the album as well, Free from Gravity. But it's a very eclectic record, like the song we just talked about, and then now Free of Gravity. They sound very different, and yet the entire album kind of feels together. How was that? I want to ask, how did you accomplish that? But that's kind of too straightforward, I suppose. But was that in the back of your mind, to have an eclectic record but still make it sound like a cohesive thing?
Not really. It's like it just comes out like that. Okay. I think, you know, Jim writes in a certain way, Tommy writes in a certain way, and Vinny writes in a certain way, and then I make beats and backing tracks in a certain way, and then when we meet up and bring them together as an album, it's like, whoa, you know, you did that, I did this. But then I think my job then is to sort of fall back on when I used to make a lot of mixtapes, like DJing, and how do you get from the Velvet Underground to Run DMC, or, you know, these mad eclectic mixtapes I used to make when I was younger. You'd try and make it flow in a way that had a something linear. You know, it might just be that a reggae ska song has a slapback delay similar to an old 50s rock and roll record. So you go down that road and connect those. And then from there, that old rock and roll record had a rudimentary drum machine. So you connect that to Suicide, or a band that uses drum machines. Or it's like trying to join the dots and find the kind of crossovers. And that's usually my job when it comes to track listing the album. It's like, how does this flow? How do I get from that to that? And sometimes that's difficult, but yeah.
Is this a thing you do on your own? Kind of you separate yourself from the band, do that, and then kind of present it to them, or is it kind of this continual interaction throughout that process?
A little bit. I mean, the album that I think was the most open to the whole band doing it was Born Under Saturn, and it's the one where I listen back and I'm like, that should have been one person's job. To make that album flow, right, because there's too many disjointed moments. And I learned from that sometimes you've just got to go with your own gut feeling rather than asking everybody, does this work? Because then you're trying to please everybody, and it's too too compromised. So I think Marble Skies and Glowing in the Dark, were more. Okay. I just went away and did a lot of that until it was right. But it's still a whole band thing. They've got to like it as well.
Sure, but no, what I was getting at is like you said, that I would assume that if one person just locks himself away for a while, that it's more of a cohesive thing than when you have so many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's one last song I wanted to discuss, which was "Got Me Worried." As a drummer, was that a fun song for you to play?
Yeah, definitely. And it's although it sounds like a bunch of people in a room having a percussion jam, it was actually started off with a sample looped, and then I just kept playing percussion over it, and then we had a Brazilian drummer guy come in and play some grooves which I looped, and it was fun. Anything that involves a lot of percussion I enjoy.
Sure.
Rather than just setting up a drum kit and going for a full beat, I like to kind of use percussion a bit more. Gives it a bit more dynamic, I think.
Mm. And well, one thing to kind of to conclude then, because I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, that you started to, or you wanted to have the live show a little bit more in the back of your head when these songs were written, to kind of fill in some things in the live show. How much of that is then kind of those percussion elements, and then kind of getting a certain driving force during a live show? But also, is it difficult when as you talk about this one where you're looping stuff and then where there's all the kinds of percussion elements coming in, is that difficult to translate then to the live show?
Yeah, it can be, because there's only 4 of us. So, we use Tommy triggers, some live samples, and we try to, it'd be great if we could have 2 extra people in the band touring and just have a couple of percussion players, in the way that like Hot Chip do, or bring those extra people in. But that's just too expensive when you're touring. So
sure.
I think when we started out, one of the bands that we wanted to be like was ESG, who had that sort of New York post-punk disco thing of just a whole track might just be a rudimentary, it might be a kick, a cowbell, and a snare. And that kind of New York post-punk thing, I think, was at the core of what we did when we started out, because we were playing a lot of parties and club nights, and we had to go on after DJs who were playing dance tracks, so we had to keep up with that. And just often the way of getting the crowd going was just a kick drum and a cowbell, because that's always fun and going to make people dance. So the more intricate the albums get and the recordings get, the more difficult that is. But you just have to strip it back and, be a bit clever with the samples and the loops that I play along to, and kind of, beef up the sound a bit so that things carry a bit and fill out a bit more. Because I guess, the songs we make aren't really built for huge venues.
Right.
It's not like stadium rock where you can just have these Led Zeppelin chugging slow grooves. It's quite intricate, so it can be a challenge sometimes, but I think that's what separates the records and the live experience a little bit.
And as you said in the beginning, that's also a good way, I suppose, of challenging yourself and kind of figuring out how to do those things. Last thought then, is there any notion, or do you have any idea of when you will be able to play live again at all? Or is that kind of, you're not even thinking about it at the moment?
It just keeps getting pushed back. So we keep booking things, and then it gets to a month before, and we say, you know, is this going ahead? Because we need to lock ourselves away and practice, which is also another problem of the lockdown situation. Is like, it's not just that we can't, the venues are shut. It's like we need to be in the same room for 3 weeks or a month and get up to scratch, because we put so much time and effort into getting these sets ready, you know. So is that kind of finding that moment now where we know the gig's going to go ahead and we can all get together, but at the moment, yeah, they just keep getting pushed back and back and back, and I don't know, I'm not going to get anxious about it or worry about it. It will happen when it happens, kind of thing. And at some point, yeah, we'll get in together and just get these tracks road ready, and yeah, it'll be good. It'll be great when it finally happens.
Yeah, as you mentioned before the cameras were turned out, eventually we'll get through this, and that will be a very joyous occasion, I think.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about the music and the record, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.